Aloha. Thank you for tuning into another episode of Love What with Audrey Weilai, where I ask my friends and mentors what non-romantic love means to them. And today our special guest is my friend Wayne. Hi, Wayne.
Hello.
Where are you tuning in from?
I'm here in Ahmed Bali, just finishing up the end of my training trip.
For freediving?
Yep, for freediving.
You arrived there in February this year and you stayed in Bali the whole time?
No, 2 weeks in Bali and then 1 month in Gili, which is in Lombok. And
Yes.
then I came back to Ahmed Bali for another month.
And you were doing
So,
freediving this whole trip?
yep, that was a very specific freediving trip.
Okay. When did you start freediving?
I first met the sport in 2013 October. I was beach bumming around in Okinawa. I just finished a cycling trip from Hokkaido to Okinawa, and
Yes.
then I met this German guy on the beach who's sleeping on a hammock, and he had really small mask and really long fins, and it got me intrigued. But then later on in 2016, that's when I officially started taking courses. In 2019, I became a freediving instructor.
And you were training in Hong Kong and also in Bali.
I did start IDA 3 in Hong Kong, but then I switched schools and ended up finishing in Bali, and then I did my IDA 4 instructor course in the Philippines.
Okay. Do you do any freediving in Canada? I assume the water's too cold.
No, not yet. Eventually, maybe one day.
Do people do freediving there? Do they wear special equipment?
Oh yeah, they do freedive there. From what I heard, even in summertime, it's a minimum 5 millimeter or even
Okay.
7 millimeters, depending on where you're diving. I'm more
Mm-hmm.
familiar with the West Coast. I was born and raised in Vancouver, but I heard a lot of people do dive in Vancouver Island,
Okay.
where it's always cold in this, even in summertime. Yeah.
Can you tell us more about yourself in addition to freediving?
I was born in Canada, Vancouver, and when I was 4 years old, my whole family went back to Hong Kong. When I introduce myself, I tend not to go too deep into this, but then since you asked, when I was 4 years old, my whole family went back to Hong Kong, and I did primary and middle school there, and then I finished my high school in Canada, and then
Mm,
I continued with my bachelor's degree in UBC. Then I worked and I stayed there, and then I left Canada in 2012, and I traveled a bit for a couple of years, and then I became a freediving instructor, and then I was in the Philippines teaching for a year. I'm not really teaching,
mm,
but I was a safety diver for the
okay.
athletes who were training there, and also safety comps. And then during COVID, I had no choice but to leave the Philippines and go to Hong Kong, and that's where I started my freediving school. And I've been teaching there.
Okay. When you say helping as a safety during competition, what does that mean?
I was working for Freedive Panglao, which back in 2019 was one of the biggest freediving schools in Asia. Because
Mm,
of the conditions there, you have always access to 100 meters depth, almost zero thermocline. It's always like 29 degrees ish water. And since
nice.
you're drifting on a boat, you don't really get much current. So a
Mm-hmm.
lot of world class athletes do train there. When I was there, Alenka was there, Dean Koch was there. Since I speak Japanese, I'm very familiar with the Japanese freediving team, so they do train there
Yeah.
as well. So I know a lot of the athletes from Japan. There were some Taiwanese athletes, people from all over the world were there.
Yeah.
What I was doing as a safety was that when these people do for their deep training dives, I'm the designated safety diver. So instead of like in Ahmed, where you would find buddies of the similar caliber and then you alternate safetying each other, back in Panglao, it was I'm as a qualified instructor, I'm the one who's responsible for safetying sometimes even three athletes on the same buoy. And I wouldn't be
Okay.
doing my own training. I'll only be safetying them to for depth.
For people who haven't done any freediving training, can you describe what you do as a safety and why that's really
Sure.
important?
These athletes, they tend to go more than 50 meters generally
Yes.
when they're diving in one breath to 50 meters. Usually at the end, when they're coming back up, the most dangerous part of their dive is from the shallower water, so like anywhere from 20 to the surface. That's when
Yes.
they would tend to have a chance of running out of oxygen, have a blacking out, or having a loss of motor control or samba on the surface.
Mm-hmm.
My job would be going down to meet them at 15, 20 meters and then swimming back up with them, observing what their condition is like, giving them assistance if they ask for it. And
Yeah.
on the surface, I would protect them in case there is a need to rescue them. But that
Mm.
rarely ever happens when I'm a safety diver for regular training. I don't think I recall there's ever injury or there's a blackout or even LMC
Mm.
when I was a safety diver for these people. Yeah, it's only
What
later
about
on
in
when I was
competition?
yeah, so competitions, that's when people not necessarily push themselves, but the competition nerves is real. I remember very clear there was one person who did no fin dives and he's already done 75 meters on training, but in order to qualify for a national record, he wanted to get to a certain depth. So very conservatively, he went 10 meters shallower than his own personal best, which is at 65,
Mm.
and he still blacked out twice during the competition. And then on the last day,
What?
he's like, okay, I was go back even shallower. He got it to 60,
Yes.
and then he knocked it out. He got his record.
Oh.
I've
Wow.
never seen someone so happy.
Okay, so for someone that's going during a competition, going to 60, at which point does the safety person meet them? And then do you have multiple safeties?
During competition, you will have a safety team. Usually, that involves at least 4 people, sometimes even
Whoa.
more. The number one safety is at least I'm going to describe what happened, what the setup was for Freedive Panglau when they're holding the Asian Freediving Cup, which is one of the biggest
Yes.
freediving competitions back then in 2019. So the number one safety is the person who's the deepest diver, who has the most experience, the best diver in the group. Back then they had a scooter, so it's an electronic scooter, so they don't need to kick, and they can very easily just hold their breath, equalize, use the scooter to go down. Usually they'll
Okay.
meet them anywhere between 30 to 40, sometimes even slightly deeper, if depending on what that safety number one deems it necessary to be. And then the second number two safety would dive down to anywhere between 20 or 30. So there's a range there that he covers. Number three safety is anywhere between 10 to 20. And then you have the surface safety that covers anywhere from the surface to 10 meters. And so there's a chain of
Right.
people. If anything happens to any one of them, the person behind it is trained to immediately take over. There would always be a continuous chain of people, like just in case. And then also at the warm-up buoy, there will be also another safety there who's just there to manage ropes, to make sure that the people warming up is also not doing anything overboard, or if anything happens to them while warming up, they would be there to help them. With that team, it's
Oh,
quite watertight. So the timing wise, that's where it becomes an art. Yeah, the athletes usually would declare what their dive time would be like. So based off on that and based off our own experiences, we decide when to dive down ourselves. Usually we allocate about 1 minute dive time, but our own
okay.
abilities tend to be, we have more than that, way more than that usually. So if we have to, we'll wait at that allotted depth and hang there and wait for the athlete and then meet them up there. And of course, as I said before, if anything happens or I didn't prepare enough, which hardly ever happens, it never happened to me, I never saw it happen, but we can always come back up and the person behind us would take it. Yeah.
You said the first person goes down with the scooter, and if you're holding the scooter and then something happens to the diver, how do you help them? Because you need two
So I've seen
hands
it
to
happen a
support
couple
them.
times. No, no. So with
Really?
the scooter, that's a really deep safety, that really, really deep rescue if that person does blackout. And if that happens, the key thing is to grab them to the surface. And if they're holding the scooter back here, they go behind them, reach their hand across from underneath their armpit, kind of like this, and then bring the hands into the
Okay,
mask
with
and the
one hand.
area, and then kind of press them against the chest, and then using the scooter to come back up like that. Yeah, so
Okay.
that's one of them, and usually by the time the other safety they go to the depth where the other safeties are at, we will also all help up. We'll all fin them up. But I've ever seen it happen on my buoy. So shout out to the athletes who do, you know, didn't go push themselves so much. So they
Yeah.
dive very safely. They all were very wise in their decisions on choosing their
Hmm.
announced depth.
What's been your personal best?
Well, I always say this, to be instructor, you need to dive to 40 meters and just leave it there.
Okay. Okay. And you mentioned that you're certified with AIDA and you're also pursuing Molchanov as well. What's the main difference between those two schools?
I don't think I know enough yet to say much about
Okay.
it. The requirements are pretty similar. We all dive to 40 meters. We all need to hold our breath to statically to 4 minutes. Like the dynamic stuff are also more or less the same. The no fins requirements are much deeper than AIDA.
I really struggled with no fins. I don't know if it was because I was overthinking it or I just didn't have enough power. If you can give me some hints.
Well, I haven't seen how you dive yet, so later on, if you show me a video, give you some appraisals. But I think no
For
fins
no
is
fins,
difficult for
it's
anybody.
bad.
It's just naturally difficult for people who aren't swimmers. I'm not particularly good swimmer as well. It takes a bit of practice, but again, if it's humanly possible,
Hmm.
you can do it. It just takes time and energy
Yeah.
to get
Yeah.
there.
What do you love most about freediving?
My answers change all the time. For now, what I really love about it, it's my mirror. It's the main reason why I dive now. I no longer wish to be a deep diver. I want to be a strong diver. When the conditions are bad, when it's wavy, the current's strong, and I'm only one around who's like smiling to himself, that's who I want to be. It's because it reflects who I am to myself. I get to know myself a lot better because, like, when you're diving, you are putting yourself in. I don't want to put it that dramatic, but it's kind of life or death situation. You know, you
Yes.
cannot screw up in a way.
Mm.
You have your safety with you. You have your line, you have all the safety equipment, you have
Mm.
the evacuation routes planned at the dive shop. But in its own way, it's having a very honest conversation with yourself as you're diving. If you're feeling all
Yes.
right, then great. It feels great and nothing's stopping you. But if it
Mm.
doesn't feel great, especially in a no fins dive, then it can feel really, really scary really quickly. So in order to mitigate that, you just have to have a very, very honest conversation with yourself that why are you doing this, for what you're doing this. Over this past training trip, I've rediscovered myself multiple times. But what happened was that when I was back in Panglao, I was younger. I was like that's 6 years ago. So I'm much younger back then. I was much fitter. I don't need that long to recover. And
Mm.
I was at a level that's way higher than what I am now. And because I've been teaching nonstop for the past 5, 6 years, I haven't been training at all.
Mm.
So when I first got here into training, I was just chasing my older shadow, who I was
Okay.
back in 2019, and that's
Wow.
definitely not the way to do it. So now I know, but when I first started, it's like, okay, yeah, I've done it before, I can do it again, but I haven't
Yes.
taken into account that I've changed, I've moved on, my body isn't
Mm.
what it was anymore, and I have to rediscover who I am now instead of like
Mm.
chasing who I was before. And that was a very difficult conversation for a while. 3 weeks I was in a stump. Nothing was going right.
Because
I
you
was
were
giving up.
judging yourself.
Yes, I was applying a lot of judgment to my dives. It wasn't the healthiest way to free dive. One of the biggest lessons I've had on this trip is that even though I had a bad session or a bad dive, I try to cover it up and or bottle it up and
Mm.
mask it with something. Okay, tomorrow will be a bit better. Maybe if I do this a little bit more, or force myself to do this something a little bit better, or try a little harder, that's something somehow that's gonna change the outcome. It didn't for like 3 weeks, and then one day I was just in deep despair mode, and I gave up. Okay, screw all of this. I'm just gonna not care about the outcome. And then the next day, I reached all of my goals, my training
Yeah.
goals. That was like a really big wake up call on how I should approach freediving. I no longer care about numbers. I care about how I
Mm.
feel for that dive.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure this has been repeated by a lot of people. It's so true.
Mm.
Now, then, when I see other people who are so fixated on numbers, on the speed, good for them, but it's not for me.
How does that translate to self-love? And what does love mean to you in a non-romantic sense?
That's a really, really good question, and I've been thinking hard about it since you brought it up on your email. Because ultimately, you're doing this for fun. That's another big lesson I heard. Like even for a competition, competitive freediving, it started
Mm,
out as recreation. We would forget about it somewhere along the line. We just got so fixated on the data, or performance, or the medals, and all that, or the kudos that you get for diving to a certain depth. But if you want to have that performance, you have to love yourself first. You have to give yourself the grace of making mistakes, of having bad sessions, or even things that are completely out of your control, like a strong current.
mm,
Or when I had a dive plan, I'm like, okay, I'm diving to this depth today, no matter what. And
mm,
then a strong current comes, and I start freaking out about, okay, now it's going to affect my dive, and that builds up a lot of pressure on myself. Therefore, I would early turn, or something would screw up my mind enough that I wouldn't want to complete the dive, or I would bail out. For me, self-love at the moment is having that grace to allow yourself to have those bad days, that it's
mm,
okay just showing up and have fun. You don't have to take it seriously. There's that famous saying that don't take life so seriously because we're not making it out alive anyways. And for freediving, we're not looking to die when we're like freediving at all. If you push yourself in a corner because of your wants, of your desire to perform, the less likely it's going to happen. So I
mm,
think freediving reflects very strongly on love, for any kind of love, because your
mm.
relationship with yourself reflects the love that you can give to others, be it romantically or not.
Yes. Mm, yeah.
So does that
During
answer your question, you
the,
think?
I think so. And during the freediving training I had in Ahmed, I felt a strong bond with people in my class because even though it wasn't life and death and it wasn't dangerous, but each dive we took it very seriously in terms of safety. And I like that there's this support and community in addition to taking care of yourself.
Oh, that comes big time as well. I've had so a little bit of dark history. I've have been pretty unfortunate. I had a really, really, really bad instructor when I first started
Mm,
out freediving, and then later,
yeah.
even on this trip, I met people that aren't switched on. They show up half an hour late to the pool session when I'm all suited up and done all my warm ups, ready to do my PBs, and they show up half an hour late, and I can't do it, and then
Mm,
that's a wasted session. Now, after a couple of bad sessions, I've met a really great group of friends. We all bring the same vibe to the table. We all show up.
mm,
We're all switched on. Everybody know what they're doing, and we're all cheering each other on.
mm,
That makes it so much easier to take that leap of faith, to, I won't say push, but be pulled out of your comfort zone enough
mm,
that you would try for more, like a longer dive or deeper dive, or hold your breath for longer, and which just happened yesterday. I was stuck at a
mm,
certain length, and then because I know I have these friends who have my back, and they bring such a positive energy to the training, I don't feel
yes.
alone when I'm doing it. And I
Yes.
think that's really, really important. Freediving has this image of a solo sport. So you see that one diver in the pool, or that one diver on the line diving deep, but it's actually a team sport. You never
Yes.
dive alone, and you're willing to dive to that certain depth because you know there's people looking after you, looking out for you. And that's what gives you the confidence, assurance
Mm,
to attempt these things. And in the end, we're here to find life. We're not here to find death.
mm, mm, mm. Yes.
So those are, and that's, I think it's a shame that certain people who are so self-centered, all they care about is their own dive, and when you're their safety, they're physically there, but you can tell their mind is not there. So when you're diving, you feel scared when these people, even though they're right in front of you. I've had quite a lot of experience with people like these, and that's the
Mm,
last time I'll ever dive with them.
mm.
Not to say that
Yeah.
they're not to say that they're bad people, but they're not suitable to be my buddy in that sense.
Mm,
And
they weren't
because I
there with you.
yes, and I think that's really, really important, because have such a high standard for who my buddies are. Therefore, I also have a very high standard of how I show up for my buddies. I should always show up at least early. I'm always ready by the time the clock ticks in. When they're preparing, I'm not on my phone. I'm not talking to other people. So they have that assurance that all my attention is on you and you are safe to do whatever it is that you need to do. And that creates that mental space for them to have that relaxation that is so important in freediving. For relaxation, that's one of the key things. Whether you have that safety of mind is important. Trust is, it has to be ultimate. You have to have absolute trust in everything. You have to have absolute trust in your gear. You have to have absolute trust in your own body. You have absolute trust in your buddies and absolute trust in your own mind. That's why you would perform whatever it is that you can perform. So building that trust is really, really important. I would say with anything human, it's also going to be a bell curve, right? And so you have people who are shy, you can absolutely trust, and then you have the people absolutely, I do not want to be near them when they're breathing, and there's whoever else is in between.
My last day in Ahmed, we had dinner together with a group, and there was a scuba diver instructor, and she was joking about why people do freediving. Because at some point, there's no light and there's no sea creature that you could see. Whereas scuba diving, you can see fish, you can see turtles. Why do freedivers do it?
I think that's a very personalized question. The answer for it. But there's always that cliche that in freediving, we don't look outside, we look within. And that's true of me as well. Right? And also, what is the definition of freediving? So is it only limited to line diving? Or is it also when I'm snorkeling, I put my head under? Technically, that's when I'm holding my breath, even for that 1 second, it's still freediving, right? Or when I'm spearfishing, I'm holding my breath. So technically, I'm still freediving. And I would be in areas that would be marine life because, fish, right? I'm hunting for it. I think for me, freediving now is a journey of self-discovery, but it's also a tool. I'm a freediving instructor, so in Hong Kong where I teach, it's a source of income. When I spearfish, that's where I find my food source in its own way. I think sometimes there's too much emphasis on the spiritual side of freediving in some certain circles that you forget to just live the life that you already have here. Like you don't need to make it more complicated than it already is, and sometimes simplifying it and just enjoying the skills that you have through freediving, improving your standard of living. So, for example, if I spearfish, I have a very high quality protein that when I eat, I feel cleaner, I have a higher energy, I don't feel tired so easily. That is an improvement of like my living standards. And I would just accept it there, and I don't see the need of pushing it further.
Through spearfishing, have you developed more respect for the ocean creatures because you've seen how they want to survive?
Oh yeah, 100%. Especially because I refuse to use a spear gun. I only use a pole spear, which is like a long stick with a pointy end and a rubber band at the end. So you have to hold on to that tension rubber band until you release it. But the range is a lot shorter. It's maximum 2 meters. So therefore, you need to get close to the fish or somehow let the fish get close to you. Even when I'm snorkeling or even when I'm taking photos, I'm still very much just a visitor of the ecosystem. But when I spearfish, then I'm definitely part of the ecosystem. I'm part of the food chain now, right? Doesn't necessarily mean I'm at the top. Therefore, I would have to think like an animal that lives in that environment, and therefore I would know where the fish would be, how they react to my presence, how my energy levels change the ecosystem. All the marine animals are very sensitive to all these changes that I'm bringing to their ecosystem, right? So in order to allow the fish to come to me, I would have to match their energy. It's like playing chess in a way. You have to think like a fish and also not to let the fish understand you. I would always teach my students who are learning spearfishing how to become a good spearfisher. Number one, be able to see it. And then second is be able to not let the fish see you. Then you will start catching fish.
Yeah.
Especially with a pole spear, it's not a point and shoot. You have to get close. You have to stop. The idea is still that you have to be part of the ecosystem. If you're nervous, you're excited, the fish would sense that and just take off. If you're aggressive, they would hide earlier. Even noise, any noise you make, even when just a squeaking noise, and when you're equalizing, would spook them off. If you dive down with a noisy duck dive, you find nothing down there because they're all hidden. It's like, what's this massive noise over the place coming down
I would be
quickly?
starving for days.
Yeah, so see, that's how when I start going to that dialogue, you start to think like a fish. What doesn't spook them? What makes them feel at home? Right? What would be part of the ecosystem? And when you can differentiate the two, then you would be able to catch successfully.
I met a French couple, and they've been sailing for 29 years. And one way to sustain themselves is spearfishing. The guy said sometimes some sharks would show up and snatch the fish away. And I said, were you ever scared? He said, usually not, because they're only interested in fish. But if lemon sharks show up, he gets out of the water. I wonder if you had encounters with apex.
Yes, I have, but not where I spearfish usually in Hong Kong. Sometimes I get invited by my Japanese friends. They're licensed to spearfish in Japan. Technically, they're guiding me. I came face to face with a tiger once down in Okinawa,
Whoa.
and that was
They are
that was
so
a bit
impressive.
that was and so, like I was at a corner of a reef, so there was a drop off and there was a corner around, and I was here, and then the tiger was behind the wall, and then when I turned, it just rounded the corner, and we just like looked at each other. I didn't have any fish on me, but that was still like a very humbling experience. I'm not the only one here who's who's the apex. Even growing up in Canada, we live with the big five up there: bears, moose, elks, wolves, and cougars. And you always have a very healthy respect for them because they can take your life. You're not in charge of your life when you meet them at that close of a distance. Because of my upbringing in Canada, I tend to be quite calm. I say I'm calm, but that's external. But I've learned not to overreact. Until you need to act. You understand that you're the guest in a sense, so you don't try to like dominate their environment, right? You give them a respectful space, let them be. If they move off, then you make your exit. Or if not, then you just stay, like let them figure you out. That usually is the safest way to do it. There's no unpredictable. There's no guarantee doing that that's gonna keep you safe. But that's probably the highest probability that would keep you safe.
Admire sharks so much. Have a healthy respect for them as well. I've encountered them in the water. I didn't feel any threat at all, and it was more mesmerizing.
I find all life mesmerizing. And when I'm be it in the water or on land, but in the water, especially like a couple of weeks ago, just before Deep Week, we saw a massive octopus just outside of Ahmed, where the palace is. It's huge. It's more than a meter in length. It's massive, and then you can look in its eye, and it's like intelligence. It's thinking. I've dove with whales and dolphins, and when you look them in the eye, you can tell that there's a life force within to be respected and to be admired.
Where did you dive with whales? And what kind of whales?
So I went to Tonga once, and that was with humpback whales. I was really, really, really lucky. There's a mom, big, massive mom, wanted to sleep, and she nudged her over to us to like go play with these guys, leave me alone. Right? And she dove down to like 12 meters and stayed there the whole time. For a whole 45 minutes, she was just sleeping there. It was just like peeking behind mommy, like looking at us. And then eventually grew enough confidence, started like playing around, and then finally, right before we left, it breached in between us. We didn't dive, just like on the surface. So a couple of times it swam directly at me and looked me in the eye and like did barrel rolls and it beamed a song at me. It was just singing, and that was like also very, very like stunning. But that doesn't happen. I would think I'm really lucky that it happened at all.
Yeah, I've only heard their songs. I haven't seen them while diving. I've only seen them from the surface. So I'm really looking forward to when that happens. Yeah.
Oh yeah, especially since you live in Hawaii, right?
Yeah, whale season in the winter, just a few more months. Are there any exciting projects you're working on or things you're looking forward to?
I have a project that's been ongoing for three years already. So I've been filming interviews with people similar to what you're doing right now, but my focus is on the relationship with freediving because all the representation in mainstream media about freediving is either really competitive, for example, the deepest breath, So the image of
Hmm.
people thinking about freediving as ultimate extreme sports that is really, really dangerous. People die all the time. And then there's the other one, there was Instagram where it's kind of like overly sexualized, I think.
Really? I've
You know
never
what I'm
heard
saying?
that one.
I think
No, I don't. I have no idea
so.
what
I
you're
think
talking
it's
about.
common knowledge that sex sells. And so you look at
Yes.
freediving photos, it's always girl with the ass in the bikini. I
Oh,
mean,
right.
props to
Yes.
them. I mean, I love seeing those as well. I'm still a
Me
guy.
too.
Those are nice, but at the same time, I don't feel comfortable with representing my sport because there's so much more to
Mm.
freediving than that. All the documentaries are about world champions, the competitive freedivers, and their stories. I'm more interested on the everyday person. So I
Mm.
interview some of my students, I interview some of the people here, and everybody has a very, very interesting. It's like how did they first meet freediving? Um, why do they keep on freediving? What did they learn from it? These everyday stories are very inspiring, even
Mm.
to everyone, because at the
Yes.
end of the day, it's how
Mm.
you choose to live your life. And so that's something that is been in I've been working on for the longest time, and it's coming together.
Well, that's exciting.
We didn't
So,
really get to talk much about like the main topic that you want to talk about.
yeah, I just got pulled into freediving so much. But yes, go
Yeah.
ahead. Talk about love if you
Uh,
want to.
you have questions?
I
What would
think
you
it's
ask?
such a yeah, I've been asking people a lot more about self-care and compassion, of acceptance, because by saying self-love, that's still very vague. It's hard for people to relate. And then asking what they mean by love, that's also been a bit difficult for people. But if you're open to share, I would be very happy to listen.
I had a very, I won't say special journey, but I've had a really rough journey as well. You grew up under Asian parents, like as
Mm,
well as I do. So that wasn't easy. So I had very, very abusive parents. I get beaten
mm,
up weekly, at least once, and
that's a
not twice,
lot. Yeah.
sometimes even more. And my dad's pretty sadistic, so he doesn't beat me out of education. He thinks it is, but it's very much
Mm.
bringing his frustration of his life onto me and my
Oh my
siblings.
goodness.
Before freediving, I was a much, much more angry person and much
Mm,
more short tempered. People who know me before freediving, after freediving, would probably tell you that I'm like a completely different person because I've been under the influence of my parents when I was growing up that I didn't know what love is, basically, until I went to, very fortunate to have a lot of really good friends in Europe. And when I did
mhm.
visit them and stay over with their family, that's the first time I ever equated parents with love, affection.
Yes.
That I was like,
Yes.
what? You guys hug each other? They're like, they're not demeaning or like putting them down
Mm,
over every
mm,
like,
mm, mm.
everything they do.
Yeah.
What is this? Like, that's when I start to realize there's a need to re-educate myself out of the
Mm,
influence of my parents. That's true
yes.
for everyone in any culture. Um,
So would you
and I
say
didn't
love
start.
is more of a skill instead of a emotion?
That's a really good question. Don't know. I would say both, I guess. I
Okay.
think love is such a broad term
Yes.
that you can mistake it for something. I think it's easier to talk about it if it's like romantic love, because in our 20s we usually mistake lust for love, which happened for me. So that didn't go very well at all. I think once I'm in my 30s, that dies down. I'm calming down a lot more.
Mm,
But on the other side, I think you really have to learn how to love yourself first before you can bring love to others.
yeah.
Before, because of the influence of my parents, all I knew was just to give myself to other people and hope that they would reciprocate, right? And that's just not
Hmm.
reality. That's nobody's obligated to, return the favor, and it's very
Hmm.
dangerous to expect that to reciprocate. I
Yeah.
just have that expectation that, okay, if you do something for someone, they would do the same for you.
Yeah.
I've lived that way for a long time, and it was like after a lot of mistakes, a lot of heartbreaks, a lot of disappointments, then I realized, okay, I'm looking at it from the wrong angle. Since then, I've been doing my best to notice what my parents did to me, and then when I'm having those moments of adversity and then notice how my reaction or what I feel during that period. And then I started to identify where the influence of my parents are and then pull that out of me and then reiterate different response. I think the French have a word called savoir-faire. I think it means like dealing with adversity with grace. There's a gracefulness when you come to dealing with things that doesn't go your way. The main way to be able to do it is to have that honest conversation with yourself, which just so coincides with whenever you dive, when you're having a bad session, when you free dive, that's the same conversation you have yourself, right? When answering your question, it's more like a skill or an emotion. In this regard, it's more like a skill. Because whenever there's a conflict of interest, if you're able to take a step back and not be overwhelmed by emotions, and just have that
Yes.
conversation with yourself first, and then respond kindly to the situation. Therefore, you can better the outcome. You're not a consumer of the situation. You're providing a solution to better the outcome. Therefore, you would gain respect. Therefore, you would gain self-esteem. You can look yourself in the mirror, be a bit proud. I can look myself in the mirror and be okay with who I am. And that is my self-care. It doesn't always have to be outcome-based. And during that confrontation, I took a step back. I de-escalated it. That's enough. You don't have to always bring the answers to the table.
Is there anything else you would like to add or?
In terms of love, unromantic love, I'm very, very blessed with having some of my best friends. One is in France. I'm almost like godfather to her son. I've been invited to her wedding in France. And these people, I've met them on a very short-term basis. So my friend in France, I met her in Taiwan at a bus stop in front of the Forbidden Palace Museum.
Okay.
And then we hang out with the other people for like 2 days, and we're best friends for life. We're still like very, very, very close with each other. And another friend, I met her in Hong Kong, and now she's married in Australia. She's like a sister to me. I'm closer to her than it is with my actual sister, which I haven't talked to for. Family doesn't, blood doesn't make family. It's your experiences, it's your bond with these people. And it's very hard to say when you meet them, and especially when I was traveling. It almost feels like your best friends are waiting, that you haven't made are waiting for you tomorrow. That's the attitude I like to look forward to every day. It's going to be great. I'm going to have great people, despite of all the bad things that happen in the world.
This is usually my favorite part of the conversation. I ask guests to leave one question for me or the viewers to contemplate on. And what would that question be from you?
It's a really good question.
Hey, it's okay if you can't think of any.
The first one that comes to mind is who are you without your talents?
What? Wait, say that again. Who are you without your talent?
Who are you without your talents? I don't really believe in talents. I speak quite a bit of language. I used to be a translator before I'm a freediving instructor. A lot of people say, "Oh, you're so talented with languages," and I never feel like that's a talent in any sort of a way, because you just haven't seen me spend time and effort in getting to the level that I'm at in freediving, right? Everybody only sees that one dive you reach your PB and say, "Oh, amazing, you're so talented," but you haven't seen the lead up to it. Right, all the work hardness that you put into it before you're getting there. For example, a world champion, I try not to see them as who they are in that sport, for example, but who they are without it. I would get to know them a lot better than who it is that just on the surface. So my question is, you know yourself beyond that. Who are you? For example, I suddenly just lose the ability to speak all 4 of the other languages that I speak. Then who am I? Am I happy with who I am, if that's the case?
Oh, that's really powerful.
Does that make sense?
Yes, yes. That's gonna leave me pondering for tonight, that's for sure. So, where can people connect with you?
I have my freediving skill. It's mostly on Instagram. It's Arte Apnea, ARETEAPNEA. You can find me there, and you can probably always find me in the water. I guess that's a cliche answer.
Well, I look forward to seeing you in the water sometimes.
Yes,
Thank you so
exactly.
much, Wayne.
Me too. Thank you so much. Yeah, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for the opportunities.
Thank you for your time. Aloha.